I've been an A doctor for over a decade, but nothing prepared me for the patient who whispered my childhood secrets. No one else could possibly know. Nights in the emergency department are measured in monitor beeps and wheels on linoleum. The smells never change. Saline, bleach, old coffee. We were between traumas when the radio crackled and the paramedics rolled through the doors with a man strapped to the gurney, dried blood crusted at his hairline, shirt torn open, ribs wrapped in field dressings. Male, late 30s to early 40s, the medic said. Head strike, possible rib fractures, hypotensive in transit, responsive to voice. Found near the river under the footbridge. No ID. I moved beside the stretcher, my hands already doing what a decade of routine had taught them. Airway, breathing, circulation. Sir, can you hear me? I asked as the team flooded the Bay Jaya, starting a second line. O'Neill hanging fluids. A tech cutting the rest of the shirt. His eyes fluttered. Hazel, filmed with shock. Doctor, he rasped. I'm here. I'm Dr. Cole. You're safe. Can you tell me your name? His gaze drifted past me to the ceiling lights. You used to count those, he murmured. 1, 2, 3, 4, on the nights you were sure the thunder meant something was coming. I felt the faintest hitch in my chest, a misfire. Focus on me, I said evenly, pressing on his abdomen, cataloging winces. Any pain here? The attic ladder sticks, he whispered, voice raw. You kick it with your left foot, because your right has the scar from the bicycle spoke. I froze, my fingers still on his ribcage. The room kept moving, orders shouted, instruments clattering, but for a moment, the sound tunneled. The scar at my right ankle is small, silvery, crescent-shaped. I've never mentioned it to anyone at work. I don't think about it when I dress. It simply exists like gravity. Sir, I said, forcing my voice back into a professional lane, you've had a head injury. You're disoriented. He turned his head toward me with a slow, painful drag, finding my eyes with terrible clarity. They called you Sparrow, he said, because you fell from the elm and still sang. Something cold crept into my spine. The nickname is from a single summer, a single person, long gone. It never followed me to med school, residency, this hospital. It shouldn't be here on a Tuesday night on a stranger's tongue. Let's get a CT head, chest x-ray, complete trauma panel, I said too quickly, stepping back. Type and screen. Vitals Q5. Jaya's eyes flicked to mine, registering the tightness in my voice, but she turned away without comment. Good nurse. As we transferred him to the ed bed, his hand shot up and closed weakly around my sleeve. The blue tin lunchbox in the attic, he said. Under the quilts. Your initials scratched inside the lid with a nail. EC, you hid the marble there, the one with the milky swirl that looked like a storm. I smelled dust then, phantom dry and sun-warmed, the attic of my childhood home. Boxes of winter clothes and the slanted window leaking light. The blue tin, the marble. I could feel the nail between my fingers again. A child's stolen gravity. Stop talking, I said, more to myself than to him. Save your strength. He let go. The monitors kept time with his shallow breaths. We moved him to radiology. In the elevator, he stared at the metal panel like it held an answer and said, almost conversationally, you were 8 when you promised never to tell. You kept that promise so well, you forgot it was there. We rolled out onto the imaging floor. The elevator doors parted with their soft sigh. He turned his head, wincing, and added, barely louder than the hum of the lights, I'm not here because of me, doctor. I swallowed. Then why are you here? His mouth twitched into something that wasn't a smile. Because of what you hid after the funeral. The doors shut behind us. For the first time in years, I felt like the child who counted ceiling tiles in a thunderstorm. And for reasons I couldn't yet name, I didn't want the scan to answer only his injuries. I was afraid it might answer me. The CT scanner hummed, its sterile ring swallowing the man whole as he slid inside. I stood behind the glass, arms crossed tighter than usual. My chest burned with something that wasn't medicine, wasn't logic, something old. The images came back quickly. Hairline fracture in the left temporal bone, scattered rib fractures, no major bleed. Enough to explain disorientation, confusion, fractured memory. That's what I told myself. A head injury could unravel reality in 100 ways, but it couldn't invent my attic. It couldn't conjure a childhood nickname no one had spoken in 25 years. When we wheeled him back to the bay, he was pale, eyes half shut. Still, the moment he sensed me nearby, they snapped open, pinning me like a specimen. "Dr. Cole," he whispered, and the way he said my name was too familiar, like a relative reaching across decades. "Do you still hear it?" "Hear what?" My voice cracked in a way my residents had never heard. The knocking under the floorboards. 3 times slow when you tried to sleep after the funeral. My throat dried. He was wrong about one detail. I hadn't been trying to sleep. I'd been counting. Tiles, rafters, anything to keep the silence from swallowing me. But the knocks, God help me, the knocks were real. I snapped back into role. "You need rest. We'll admit you to trauma. Monitor vitals, pain control, neuro checks." My words were clipped, clinical, as if speed could cover the cracks. But when the nurses stepped out, he caught my sleeve again. Grip weaker, but steady. "You were 8 years old, Edward. You promised never to tell, but you did. You told me. You told me everything." For the first time in my career, I pulled away not because of infection risk, not because of time, but because I couldn't stand his touch. I walked out, faster than I should have, my coat flaring behind me. In the corridor, Jaya caught up. "Doctor, what's wrong?" "You're pale." "Nothing," I lied. "Head trauma patients confused. Say things that don't make sense." She hesitated. "But he said your name. He knows things." "Coincidence," I cut in, sharper than I intended. "Get him stabilized." I escaped into the stairwell, not the radiology stairwell, but the one near pediatrics. I leaned against the wall, heart slamming. My ankle throbbed suddenly, the old crescent scar hot as if freshly cut. The blue tin lunchbox, the marble, the attic dust. His voice replayed in my head. "I'm not here because of me, doctor. I'm here because of what you hid after the funeral." For the first time since residency, I realized I wasn't afraid of losing a patient. I was afraid of myself. I avoided his room for most of the day, burying myself in sutures, consults, anything that would keep me busy. But avoidance in the IEs, like plugging a hole in a dam, pressure builds, and eventually it bursts. By evening, I had no choice. He was deteriorating. Blood pressure dropping, oxygen saturation slipping. Trauma needed me. When I stepped back into Bay 3, his gaze found me instantly. It didn't matter that half the staff swirled around his bed, adjusting IVs, setting up a transfusion. His eyes locked onto mine as though I were the only figure in the room. "Edward," he whispered. The sound of my first name, soft and deliberate, twisted in my gut. No one here called me that. Not residents, not nurses, not patients. Always Dr. Cole. Always distance. My first name belonged to my childhood, to a house that had long since been sold, to a past I had buried so deeply that even I avoided thinking of it. I leaned in, trying to stay composed. "You need to conserve your strength." "Instead," he said, "you never told them about the doll in the box, the one you hid after she died." My legs nearly buckled. Heat rushed to my face. The image was sudden, violent. The funeral, the neighbors' sympathetic murmurs, the way I had slipped upstairs afterward, clutching the little porcelain doll that had been hers. My sister's. I hid it in a box beneath the quilts, the same box with the blue tin lunchbox. I hadn't seen it in decades. I hadn't spoken her name aloud since I was 8. Who are you? The words tore out of me before I could stop them. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. You already know. Jaya looked up at me, puzzled. Doctor? I straightened so fast my coat snapped. Intubate if necessary. Keep the lines wide open. I'll be back. I left before she could ask more. In the corridor, I pressed my back to the cold wall, trying to slow my breathing. He wasn't just repeating childhood memories. He was peeling me open, layer by layer, until the parts of myself I'd spent a lifetime suppressing lay raw and exposed. And he wasn't done. I knew it with bone-deep certainty. By midnight, the Iya quieted. I told myself I wouldn't go near him again, but curiosity, or maybe compulsion, dragged me back. He was awake, staring at the ceiling. As I stepped in, he turned his head, lips curling faintly. You counted the ceiling tiles that night, he murmured. 64. My throat closed. And then you swore, he said, eyes burning into me. You'd never forgive yourself. I couldn't breathe because he was right. Every word. I didn't sleep after that shift. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The streets blurred past, empty and wet under the sodium glow of street lamps. But all I saw was him, his broken body, his hollow eyes, his voice speaking truths no one else could know. The box, God, the box. I hadn't thought of it in years, hadn't let myself. After the funeral, I'd climbed into the attic alone. My mother was sedated, my father silent in the kitchen, relatives filling the house like moths. No one noticed me. No one noticed the doll in my hand, its porcelain sheet cracked, its blue dress stained with dirt from where it had fallen outside that day. I placed it in the box with quilts. It smelled like cedar and dust. And then, desperate, I scratched my initials into the tin lunchbox with a nail, sealing a promise into metal, never to speak of it, never to remember. And now a stranger was digging it up, bleeding on my stretcher, gasping words that belonged only to me and the dead. When I came back from my next shift, I swore to myself I would treat him like any other patient. No listening, no reacting. Just vitals, scans, labs. A body to mend, nothing more. But the moment I entered Bay 3, he lifted his head and whispered, "You buried her twice." My chest clenched. "You're delirious," I said coldly. "Once in the ground," he went on, voice raw but steady, "and once in that box. You thought if you hid her doll, you could hide her too. But grief doesn't stay buried, Edward." The way he said my name, my real name, not my title, was unbearable. I snapped, "How do you know these things?" He smiled faintly, teeth pink with blood. "Because you told me." "No." My voice cracked. "I didn't." "You did," he whispered. "When you were 8, when the knocking came. You told me everything in the dark." The room seemed to tilt. I tasted dust, felt the sharp edge of the nail in my small fingers, heard the hollow rap of something under the floorboards. 3 times, slow. I staggered back. Jaya's voice broke the spell. "Doctor, are you all right?" I forced composure. "He's confused. Documented. I'll check on him later." But I knew the truth. He wasn't confused. He was remembering something that should have died with me. And the terrifying thought was this: maybe I wasn't remembering him. Maybe I was remembering us. That night, I couldn't escape the sound. Even in my own apartment, with the city's noise filtering through the window, the knocks came back 3 slow raps under the floorboards. I heard them as clearly as I had when I was 8, lying awake after the funeral, eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting for something to rise from the silence. I tried to drown it out with the television, with whiskey, with medical journals spread across my desk. Nothing helped. The sound seeped through the walls, through my chest, until I slammed my fists on the table and shouted into the empty room, "Stop!" The silence that followed was worse. By the time I returned for my next shift, I felt hollowed out, a man-shaped shell in a white coat. I told myself I'd avoid him, let the trauma team handle his case. But the ER has a way of cornering you with the things you fear most. When the monitors beeped frantically in Bay 3, I was the one who ran in. He was seizing. Jaya held his shoulders while Lise readied the lorazepam. I pressed the pads to his chest, ready to intervene. His body convulsed, eyes rolling back. But then, mid-seizure, his lips moved. Words forced themselves out, guttural, slurred, but unmistakable. 3 knocks. 3 days? I froze, syringe hovering above the line. Then louder, with a clarity no seizure patient should have. "You told me, Edward. You begged me not to tell them what you'd done." I nearly dropped the syringe. Lise shot me a startled look. "Doc, did he just say your name?" "Give the meds," I snapped, voice breaking. He pushed the lorazepam. The seizure broke, Elias sagging against the bed. The monitor steadied, but I couldn't breathe. When the others left, I lingered. His eyes fluttered open, glassy but aware. He fixed them on me and whispered, "The attic window. You left it open that night. That's how it came in." My stomach dropped. No one could know that. No one. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. The memory I had locked away for decades was clawing back, detail by detail. The open window, the summer storm, the smell of wet earth. And the knocks. Always the knocks. Elias closed his eyes again, drifting back into unconsciousness, but I couldn't look away. Because for the first time, I remembered something I had forced myself to forget. The knocks hadn't come from under the floorboards. They had come from inside the room. I avoided Bay 3 for as long as I could, but duty is merciless. By midnight, his vitals dipped again, and I was paged. My stomach clenched as I walked down the corridor. Each step toward that room felt heavier, as though the floor itself resisted my weight. Elias lay half-propped on pillows, his skin waxy, sweat slicking his brow. Yet when his eyes opened, they burned with lucidity. He didn't look at the monitors or the 4 bags. He looked only at me. "You heard it again, didn't you?" He rasped. I froze in the doorway. "What?" The knocking. 3 times. Just like before, my throat tightened. "You're delirious. Your brain's misfiring." He smiled faintly, as if humoring a child. "It wasn't under the floorboards, Edward. You know that now." I gripped the rail of his bed, leaning in close, whispering through clenched teeth. "Who are you? How do you know these things?" His reply was soft, almost tender. "Because I was there." The room seemed to contract around me. I was 8 again, lying awake after the funeral, thunder rattling the attic window. I remembered clutching the quilt under my chin, whispering into the dark, "Please don't come in. Please don't knock again." And then I had told someone something about the doll, about the lunchbox, about the promise. A child desperate for comfort, confessing to the shadows. I staggered back. "No," I muttered. "That's impossible." Elias's hand trembled as he lifted it, pointing toward the ceiling. "You opened the window. You let me in." The fluorescent light above us flickered once, twice, then steadied. My skin crawled. Mara entered with a chart, breaking the moment. "Doctor, we need your orders." She paused, sensing the tension, her gaze flicking between us. "Keep him on fluids," I said too quickly. "Pain control, neuro checks every hour." My voice shook, betraying me. When she left, Elias whispered, "You buried her doll, but you didn't bury me." I stayed. I could hardly breathe. His words carried the weight of memory, not his, but mine, or ours. I left the room without charting, walking fast down the corridor, trying to outrun the sound already growing louder in my head. 3 knocks, slow, final, waiting for me to answer. The EI slowed in the hours before dawn, but inside me, there was no stillness. Every beep of the monitors, every shuffle of shoes against tile, was drowned beneath that phantom rhythm. 3 deliberate knocks, replaying over and over in my skull. I hid in the staff lounge, gripping a paper cup of stale coffee until it buckled in my hand. My reflection in the vending machine glass looked older, haunted. The name he had called me Sparrow kept circling back, a name only my sister had ever used. And yet, Elias knew it. When the pager buzzed, I jumped so hard the coffee spilled across my lap. Bay 3 patient agitated. I nearly didn't go, but duty dragged me by the throat. Inside, Elias was sitting upright, restraints half loosened, monitors shrieking. Jaya was trying to calm him. He turned his head when I entered, and everything else, the alarms, the staff fell away. "Sparrow," he whispered, "you grew taller, but you never learned to sing again." My legs went numb. I dismissed the others with a wave, forcing a brittle calm. When the room emptied, I leaned close to him. "Stop calling me that." He shook his head. "You gave me the name when you opened the window. You said if I kept your secret, you'd let me stay. I kept it, Edward. I've kept it all this time." Memories slammed into me. Rain-soaked nights, the attic's sour dust, the crack in the porcelain doll's cheek. The way I whispered to the dark after her funeral, telling it everything I couldn't say to my parents, to God, to anyone. "You're not real," I said, my voice shaking. "You're a man with a head injury, that's all." But he only smiled, blood drying at the corner of his lips. "Then why did you hear me knocking last night?" I backed away, hand gripping the doorframe. He coughed, then added softly, "You promised you'd never forget me. And yet, here we are. I came back to remind you." The monitor steadied, his body sagging against the bed again, eyes slipping shut. I stood there for a long time, breath shuddering, realizing the truth that terrified me most. Elias wasn't learning my secrets. He was remembering them. I drove home after that shift, but the hospital didn't stay behind. It followed me, its fluorescent hum, its antiseptic stench, its shadows wearing Elias's face. I didn't turn on the lights when I entered my apartment. I just sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound I knew would come. And it did. 3 knocks, slow, patient, not from the door, from above. My chest seized. The building didn't have an attic, just concrete and steel. Yet the sound was the same as when I was 8, lying awake under rafters heavy with cedar and dust. I felt myself curl inward like that child again, whispering into the dark, "Please don't come in." I must have blacked out, because when I opened my eyes, it was morning. I was still on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, heart still hammering. By evening, I was back in the EA, half afraid, half compelled. Bay 3 was quiet. Elias sleeping under a thin blanket, monitors tracing steady lines. For a moment, I convinced myself it had all been delirium, his and mine. Then his eyes opened. "You heard me last night," he said calmly. I froze in the doorway. "You don't need an attic for me to knock. I go where you go. You let me in years ago, remember?" My mouth was dry. "What are you?" He smiled faintly. "I'm the part you buried in the box. The part that remembers her better than you do." The words landed like glass in my chest. My sister's doll, the lunchbox, the promise, I had sealed them away to survive. And maybe something else had crawled in with them? "I don't believe you," I said, but the words had no force. He leaned closer, whispering with the weight of certainty. "Tonight, Sparrow. Tonight, I knock for the last time." The monitor beside him beeped steadily, oblivious. But in the silence between us, I already heard it. 3 slow knocks, echoing in my skull, and this time they were closer. I tried to bury myself in work that night. Sutures, consults, paperwork, anything to drown out the rhythm growing louder in my head. But every quiet moment was a trap. When the AA slowed, when the machines hushed for just a second, I heard it. 3 knocks. Soft, patient, waiting. At 2:17 a.m., I found myself standing outside Bay 3 without remembering how I got there. My hand rested on the doorframe, trembling. Inside, Elias lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if listening to the same rhythm I was. "You can't shut it out forever," he murmured when he saw me. "It's under the floorboards again." I stepped inside, voice hoarse. "What do you want from me?" His gaze snapped down to meet mine. "Not me, Sparrow. You. You wanted me. You called me when you were a boy. You opened the window, and you whispered all the things you couldn't tell anyone else. Your grief, your guilt, your promise. I was born from that." My chest tightened, heat crawling up my neck. "No, you're sick. Brain injury, seizures, confabulation." "Then why?" he cut in, his tone sharp as glass. "Do you still hear me knocking?" The air thinned. I could almost smell the cedar dust, the damp quilts, the mildew of the attic. My pulse raced as the memory I had tried to forget burst through. The funeral, the thunder, the knocking that came from inside the room after I whispered my secrets to the dark. "I never asked for this," I said, but it sounded weak, childlike. He leaned forward, eyes fever bright. "You did. You begged me to listen, and I did. I've listened all these years." The monitors beeped steadily, but the silence around us pulsed with that old rhythm. 3 knocks, not distant, not imagined. This time, I swear they came from under his bed. I stumbled back, colliding with the crash cart. My breath hitched. Elias only closed his eyes, a faint smile tugging his lips. "See?" he whispered. "I'm still here. I never left." And in that moment, I wasn't sure if he meant the hospital bed or me. By the 10th day, exhaustion was eating me alive. My colleagues thought it was the shifts, the sleepless nights, the endless churn of the E. They didn't know the truth that I hadn't slept, because every time my eyes closed, I was back there, back in that attic, with cedar dust in my nose and rain dripping through the cracked window. Back with the box, the doll, the marble. And the knocks, always the knocks. I told myself not to go near Bay 3 again. I swore it. But just before midnight, my steps carried me down the corridor like I was a puppet and someone else was pulling the strings. My hand touched the doorframe, and I knew before I looked inside that he would be waiting. He was. Elias sat upright, pale, gaunt, electrodes still haloed around his head. His lips curled when he saw me. "You kept me waiting, Sparrow," he whispered. My skin crawled. "Stop calling me that. It's who you were when you let me in. It's who you are when you hear me knocking. The doctor's coat doesn't change that." I stepped closer, my voice shaking. "What are you?" His eyes shone with something too old for a 30-something man. "I'm what grief made. I'm what you birthed the night you begged for someone to listen. You made me from whispers and promises." And I stayed. The floor felt unstable beneath me. My throat ached. "If that's true, what do you want now?" His head tilted. "To finish the knocking." And then I heard it clear, distinct. 3 slow knocks, reverberating through the bay. Jaya wasn't there. No staff moved in the hall. It was just me, Elias, and that sound crawling into my bones. "Where is it coming from?" I whispered. He smiled faintly, eyes sliding shut. "You already know. You've always known." The lights flickered once overhead. My heart pounded so violently, I had to grip the rail of his bed to steady myself. Because deep down, I knew the truth. The attic wasn't a place anymore. It was inside me, and the knocking was getting louder. I didn't want to go home after that shift. I didn't want the silence, the dark, the chance that the knocking would follow me into my own walls again. So I stayed. I wandered empty corridors, sat in break rooms with dead vending machines, stared at monitors that didn't belong to my patients. But no matter where I went, the sound followed. 3 knocks, slow, patient, relentless. By dawn, my body felt like stone. When the new team came in, I lied and said I was charting, but my notes were empty. My mind kept circling back to one thing: the attic, the blue tin lunchbox, the doll, the marble, the box I had buried in quilts to hide from my parents, from God, from myself. I hadn't just hidden it from them. I had hidden it from me. By evening, I found myself outside Bay 3 again. My hand hovered over the curtain, trembling. When I pushed it aside, Elias was awake, waiting like he'd known I would come. "You've been hearing it all day," he said. I didn't answer. My throat was raw. He tilted his head. "It's not the knocking that frightens you. It's what comes after." "The opening," I whispered. "There's nothing left to open. That box is gone. That house is gone." He smiled faintly, his voice barely audible, but sharp as glass. "Not gone. Just waiting." The monitors hummed steadily beside him, but in the silence between the beeps, I heard it again. Not from the walls, not from the floor, from inside me. 3 knocks. I doubled over, clutching my chest as if something had rapped against my ribs from the inside. The room tilted. Elias's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You invited me in when you were a child. Tonight, you open the box again. And this time, you won't be able to close it." I staggered back, gasping, desperate to leave. But my hand wouldn't release the curtain. Because some part of me wanted to stay. Some part of me wanted to see what was inside. The hospital was nearly silent that night. No traumas, no sirens, just the low hum of machines and the sterile whisper of vents. I should have gone home. I should have walked out the doors and left the ER behind me. But my feet carried me instead to Bay 3, one last time. Elias was waiting. He didn't look like a patient anymore. The bruises, the wires, the pallor, they were there, but they seemed secondary, like disguises. His eyes glowed with the calm of someone who had already won. "You're ready?" he whispered. My throat ached. For what? The final knock. I shook my head, tears burning the corners of my eyes. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want you." "You did," he said gently. "You begged for me in that attic. A child alone, drowning in guilt. You gave me your secrets, your grief, your shame. You made me real. And I've been knocking ever since." The sound came then loud, undeniable. 3 knocks. Not from the walls, not from the floor, from inside my chest. I gasped, clutching at my ribs. The monitors around Elias spiked, alarms blaring, though no one else seemed to hear. It was only us, locked in the echo of that sound. He leaned forward, voice low, tender, terrible. "Open the box, Sparrow." And suddenly I was 8 again, standing in the attic, my hands on the quilts. The tin lunchbox gleamed dully in the stormlight, its lid trembling beneath my fingers. I heard the knocks behind me, felt the cold air of the open window, and still I lifted the lid. The doll stared up at me. The cracked porcelain cheek, the marble resting beside it like an unblinking eye, and something else dark, shapeless, coiled tight, waiting. The box wasn't just memory. It was a door, and I had opened it. When I blinked, I was back in the EA. Elias was smiling faintly, his voice almost a lullaby. Now you remember. Now you know. The last knock reverberated through me, louder than my heartbeat. My vision blurred. The room tilted. And in that collapsing silence, I finally understood the truth. He wasn't my patient. He was mine. The thing I had carried since childhood. The shadow I had birthed with grief. And tonight, I hadn't just remembered him. I had let him in again.